It's James with NetNewsLedger. Joining us by Zoom is Dr. Verma from the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, which is Ontario's newest medical university that stands alone. Welcome to NetNewsLedger.
Thanks very much, James. It's a pleasure to be here. And I have to say, it's no longer Northern Ontario School of Medicine. It's NOSM University. That's our new name.
And that's exciting news. When you think about it, Thunder Bay is a fairly small city. We now have a university, a college, a law school, and a medical university. This is fabulous news for our region.
Absolutely. And we're so proud to be in Thunder Bay. We're so proud to have roots in the Northwest. NOSM University intends to build on those relationships, and we intend to actually make things better. We want to create jobs. We want to improve the economy. We want to help people get accessible healthcare. And more importantly, we want to provide learners and young people with a chance to go to new programs that we're going to be able to offer in our medical university. It's the first of its kind in Canada. It follows in the ranks of many spectacular universities, but this entity is known around the world, and we're going to lead the way.
And that's kind of a role that, when you think of it, especially for Northern Ontario, leading the world, that's exciting. And what is this going to mean for example, for healthcare across our region as we move forward?
Well, we are actually already well situated from Kenora to Sioux Lookout to all across the Northwest and the Northeast. But we believe that our opportunity to integrate our presence and to, like Thunder Bay Regional Hospital, actually be much more of a regional presence, right? And we tend to lead mostly in healthcare. So our commitment is to make sure that those people who have to travel 3 hours to, see a doctor, right now we can provide virtual options, and NOSM U can do that kind of innovation. We can also do research in those areas where normally there isn't a lot of attention given, like places where there's no food security, no water security. And if you think the gas prices today in Thunder Bay are bad, imagine what they're like outside of Thunder Bay. So we really care about everybody in the Northwest, and we intend to actually lead on our social accountability mandate. Now, to your average person, James, this is going to be like, well, what does that mean for us? Look, what this means is that because we have an international reputation and because we are now able to confer our own degrees, we can actually become meaningful, relevant, and we can make a difference in your life. We can actually do research on why is it that COVID is continuing? Why is it that it's sticking around? We can do research on what it means to have asthma, and forest fires make it worse. Why is
Yes.
that? We can train our students to be in communities where you can't get everything in the store. Like today, there's shortages in every store, and our students have to find ways to counsel people on nutrition, on how to take care of their families when it's very expensive. Healthcare is more than just a doctor writing a prescription. Healthcare is about literacy, about the ability to buy things, the ability to have a job, and to survive infections like COVID.
That's really the crux of moving forward, because it's been so confusing for so many people. And I see it just locally with COVID. It's like people mentally and physically want it to be over. And yet yesterday we were getting information from the World Health Organization that the COVID numbers are increasing. And literally in the United States, there's 1,200 people a day right now dying from COVID. And America, which usually gets nailed for, gun violence, gets 53 handgun deaths a day on average. So COVID is a real threat to life still. And yet, just because we seem to want it over, that's not how it works.
Well, now that you will have a medical university, the ability to expand beyond the ivory tower and to be right there in the coal face of where people are experiencing their challenges, right? They have, for example, diabetes. Well, you can say, well, you need to not eat sugar and don't eat white bread. But if you've got diabetes and you only have white bread in your grocery store, what do? Let's talk about going back to the way things were, like wild rice and traditional food, and where that actually is far better for you. And let's lift that up. So, a medical university is more than just sitting in a room, even being a doctor and sitting in a room and just lecturing to everybody. We actually can now be unfettered by those constraints that we might have had before, to be able to actually speak with and speak for and to interpret for people that we are part of. We're not going anywhere, by the way. We're staying. We're staying in Thunder Bay and we're staying in the Northwest, but we want to become more relevant. So, I'm a pretty straight talker, right, James? I mean, I tell you, what's the difference? Well, you've got a lot of people who sit and learn and lecture from their podiums, but that's not what NOSMU is. NOSMU is there in your hometown. NOSMU is there in Thunder Bay talking to the people who have to go to the hospital, who feel that they can't, use ceremony in the hospital. NOSMU is there in the labs where we can actually help people get the tests they need. So we're going to be a real mover and shaker. And that's what a medical university is, as opposed to being a, separate institution within an institution. It actually becomes almost fluid across the whole Northwest.
Now,
Does that make any?
it does. And one of the issues we keep seeing across, I call it Western and Northern Ontario, but across Northern Ontario, we've got all the Indigenous communities, and we've got, long waits for healthcare. People have to fly out for healthcare. And one of the concerns, I think, looking forward on this is what would be the Indigenous percentage of students in the program and graduation numbers as we move forward? What's the goal?
We're doing better than anyone else in Canada is, and we're definitely, competing with the University of Saskatchewan and University of Manitoba, but we're better than anybody. We get 17% of our class this year. So, 17% of 64 incoming students. That's higher than the 3% in the country, right? So that's, we select for people not because, well, they're smart for sure and they're intellectually strong, but they're also compassionate, they're culturally competent, but they're also from our place, they're from our communities, right? Now, in terms of graduation, like, we've only been around 15 years for graduating classes, right?
Yes.
And only 10 years because after you get your doctor degree, you have to go and do some training to become other doctors' specialties, like family medicine takes 2 years. So we've had 55 doctors who are Indigenous who've graduated. But our real challenge is that they're not going into practice in First Nations communities. Like, I'm not gonna, mollycoddle you on this one. Our biggest challenge is doctors, when they graduate, they like to settle. So a large amount of our graduates have settled in Thunder Bay. Now our job is to get them to smaller communities. Like, even Sioux Lookout's in trouble right now. Sioux Lookout needs a lot of doctors. So our job is to make sure that those people can get to those places and they want to practice in those communities. I went around Northwestern Ontario in the fall, as you probably know. I went everywhere. I was all over hashtag where's Dr. Verma on Twitter. And I got to tell you, I mean, every single community is in trouble because of doctor burnout, because of COVID, and just because it's hard to settle doctors in rural and remote communities. So we've started a new program called the Rural Generalist Pathway, and that's a big mouthful. But basically what we're trying to do is to get people to go train in those areas, to become comfortable in those areas so they can be confident and to lay roots in those areas.
The goal is basically keeping to the north.
Absolutely. As much as we can. Although I could tell you that NOSMU's job is to train these people, but it's up to the cities, it's up to the municipalities, it's up to the communities to actually attract them and retain them. So, for example, you need to have really great schools, you need to have great housing, you need to make sure that there are actually amenities in life. Like, you know, if you're going to move there as a doctor, your spouse needs a job, right? And those things are what, you know, municipalities, and I've talked to a lot of municipalities and they're game. So, you know, we're going to be a partnership with municipalities, with other institutions. Hospitals have to help find the jobs. And what we intend to do is to make sure that those doctors who do settle in those communities, you know, they bring jobs. For every dollar a doctor brings into a community, he or she generates $6 into the for every dollar into the economy.
So it's not, and it wouldn't be just, say, for example, you come in as a doctor, you've got a nurse, you've got a receptionist, you've got eventually lab staff, or even do the
Yeah, and
tests that are needed.
pharmacists, right? Pharmacists and
Yes.
even taxi drivers or people who take you to see the doctor. I mean, the economy is pretty remarkable. And remember, the one thing that industry finds, like if you're going to open a mine, for example, or have a forestry business and you want to bring employees there, they're going to want to come because they can get access to a doctor. So helping people, other industry grow is a big part of what NOSMU can do. The real message here is that now that we're on our own, and by the way, I mean, this was sort of pretty quick and it was pretty well as a result of the Laurentian insolvency. But now that we're there, listen, we're game. We want to make a difference in Northwestern Ontario, and we want to partner with everybody to actually help Northwestern Ontario become the bright and shining star that it is. Speaking of which, I'm so pleased. I live part-time in Thunder Bay and I love it. And I want to show off to the world that there's really a fantastic life out there. But we do need better healthcare for sure.
Dr. Verma, I want to thank you for taking the time today.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for having me.